They took my keys, locked me out in the rain, and treated me like a stranger in the house I paid for. My husband watched from inside while his mother tried to steal everything my aunt left me. But they forgot one thing. I had every proof in my binder, and I was not coming back to beg. My name is Kerris Lark Vale. I was 33 years old, standing in the rain on the front porch of the house I had bought with my aunt's inheritance, when the smart lock blinked red for the third time, and my mother-in-law's voice came through the door. "You don't live here tonight, honey. Not until you learn respect." My husband was inside. His truck was in the driveway, the kitchen light was on, my own curtains were open, and in my hand, hanging from a brass keyring my aunt had given me before she died, there was no house key. Eudora Vale had taken it that morning for everyone's safety. She had changed the lock code by dinner. She had told the neighborhood association I had moved out. She had a quitclaim deed waiting on the dining room table. She had family gathered in my living room to celebrate a transfer that was never going to happen. What she did not know was that for 8 months, every lock change, every email, every contractor invoice, every forced family rule, every fake signature, and every quiet little threat had been placed inside one blue binder labeled Maple Fairy House File. And the next morning, when my lawyer stood beside me in the courthouse hallway and said, "Walk in calm, Kerris. We end this today," I finally understood something. A door can keep you out for one night, but a deed can bring you back forever. If you have ever been made to feel like a guest in a life you paid for, stay with me. Because this is the story of how my mother-in-law tried to take my home one key at a time, and how I walked back in without raising my voice. I should begin with the house, because the house was never just wood and glass and old wiring to me. It sat on Maple Ferry Road in Bellingham, Washington, 3 blocks from the bay, and 2 blocks from a bakery that smelled like cinnamon every morning at 5. It was a 1924 Craftsman with cedar shingles, a deep front porch, built-in shelves, old brass vents, and floors that creaked in a way that sounded almost human at night. The first time I saw it, the gutters sagged, the porch rail leaned to one side, and the kitchen wallpaper had faded into a yellow color no paint company would ever admit to making. I loved it immediately. My Aunt Blythe had raised me after my mother left when I was 9, and my father decided that child support was something other men paid. Aunt Blythe was not soft in the usual way. She did not make pancakes shaped like hearts or write emotional birthday cards. She was a permit clerk for the county for 34 years, wore sensible shoes, and believed every adult should know where their documents were. But she never missed a school concert. She taught me how to check a breaker box, how to compare loan estimates, and how to walk away from anyone who made love feel like a favor. When she died from a stroke at 68, she left me a modest life insurance payout. A shoebox full of old house keys she had collected from every apartment she had ever rented, and one sentence in her will that I read until the paper softened at the fold. "Buy yourself a door no one else can close." That was how I bought the Maple Ferry House. I was 29 then, working as a restoration documentation coordinator for a small firm that helped homeowners repair historic properties without ruining their souls. My job was not glamorous. I took photographs of rotten windowsills, organized permit packets, chased contractors for receipts, and wrote reports clear enough that building inspectors did not have to call twice. I knew how to keep a paper trail because paper trails were my language. A house, I had learned, told the truth if you kept the records. The deed was in my name only. Kerris Lark Vale. Back then, my last name was still Lark. I paid the down payment with Aunt Blythe's money, secured the mortgage with my own income, and spent the first year repairing one room at a time. I ate soup from a camping pot while the kitchen had no cabinets. I slept under 3 blankets while the old furnace coughed itself awake each morning. I sanded the stairs until my wrists hurt. I cried the night I hung the first clean curtain in the front window, not because the curtain was beautiful, but because no one had asked permission to enter. It was mine. Not fancy, not finished, but mine. I met Brecken Vale at a lumber supplier outside Ferndale during a week when rain had turned every parking lot into a shallow gray lake. He was picking up maple boards for a custom cabinet job, and I was arguing with a clerk about whether my porch beam order had been mislabeled. Brecken stepped in, not like a hero, just like a man who understood wood better than computer screens. He had broad hands, a slow smile, and a quiet way of listening that made me feel less alone than I had felt in years. He was 31, a cabinet maker with his own small shop, and he spoke about dovetail joints the way some people speak about music. Our first date was coffee at the bakery near my house. Our second was him helping me carry a cast iron sink from my garage to the kitchen because I had bought it used and had completely underestimated its weight. By the third month, he was fixing my pantry shelves, staying late, laughing at the way I labeled every folder, and saying things like, "This place feels like it was waiting for you." I wanted to believe that meant he understood. Brecken's mother, Eudora Vale, came to dinner on a Sunday in October. She was 62, tall and narrow, with silver blonde hair cut in a perfect bob and a coat the color of storm clouds. She brought white tulips in a glass vase and placed them in the center of my dining table before I could offer one. "Every old house needs discipline," she said, looking around at my half-finished trim and open paint cans. "Otherwise, it starts raising the people inside it instead of the other way around." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She was not. During dinner, she asked what I owed on the mortgage, how much insurance cost, whether the roof had been inspected, and who held my spare key. Brecken looked uncomfortable for maybe half a second, then reached for the bread. I told her the spare key was with my neighbor, Mrs. Ione Braddock, an 80-year-old widow with a doorbell camera and a habit of watching the street like she was guarding a border. Eudora smiled. "That is sweet," she said, "but family should have access before strangers." She said family in a way that sounded warm on the surface and locked underneath. I married Brecken the following June in a small ceremony at a waterfront park. The rain held off until the last photograph, which everyone called good luck. Aunt Blythe had been gone 3 years by then, but I tied one of her old brass keys to my bouquet with a blue ribbon. Brecken cried when I walked toward him. Eudora cried too, one hand pressed against her pearls. I thought those tears meant she was accepting me. Later I would understand she was not losing a son that day. She was gaining a door. We decided Brecken would move into my house after the wedding. He still had a small rental near his shop, but my house had more room, and he said he loved the idea of building our future inside walls I had already saved. I asked him if it bothered him that the house was legally mine. He kissed my forehead and said, "A marriage isn't a courthouse file, Kerris." I wanted to believe that was romantic. Now I hear it differently. A marriage may not be a courthouse file, but sometimes a courthouse file is the only thing that keeps a marriage from swallowing you whole. The first few months were almost happy. Brecken built open shelves in the kitchen. I painted the downstairs hallway a soft green. On Friday nights, we ate takeout on the floor because the dining chairs were being repaired in his shop. Eudora visited often, but at first her visits looked like help. She brought casseroles, folded towels, and said, my porch plants needed better drainage. She had opinions about everything, where the coffee mugs belonged, which light bulbs looked cheap, whether the front door should stay its original blue or be painted black, because black doors looked settled. I pushed back lightly, the way a polite daughter-in-law pushes back when she still wants peace. "I like the blue," I said. Eudora touched the door frame and smiled. "Of course you do. You're still learning what the house wants." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Houses do not want. People do. And Eudora wanted more than a coat of paint. The spare key became an issue in November. We were having dinner when Eudora said she had stopped by that afternoon and could not get in. I told her I had been at work. She said, "Exactly. What if there had been an emergency?" I asked what kind of emergency required her to enter my house while I was not home. Brecken shifted in his chair. Eudora looked wounded, as if I had accused her of burglary instead of asking a normal question. "Kerris, I am not some stranger off the street. I am your husband's mother. If a pipe burst or Brecken hurt himself, I would be helpless on the porch. Brecken reached for my hand under the table. "It's just a spare," he said. "Mom worries. Let her have one." I thought of Aunt Blythe's rule: never give someone permanent access because they created temporary guilt. But I was newly married. I did not want to be the wife who made everything about ownership. So I gave Eudora a spare key the next Sunday. She held it in her palm like a promise I had made to her. After that, small things shifted. I would come home and find my mail stacked on the kitchen counter, opened by accident because Eudora thought it was Brecken's.
But the venue was on my way home, and saying no to my mother still felt like pushing a heavy door uphill. So I drove to Bayglass Hall, a renovated cannery turned wedding space with tall windows facing the water. Everything inside was polished wood, soft gold lights, and money pretending to be taste. The manager, Rilla Crossley, met me near the lobby desk. She was a neat woman with silver hair cut to her jaw and a voice that sounded trained to calm angry brides. I gave her the box. She checked a tablet, smiled, and said, "You must be Marin Ashford?" I nodded, already turning to leave. Then she added, "I've been meaning to thank you. Your father's fund covered the ballroom deposit beautifully. It made the booking much easier." I stopped so fast the strap of my tote slid down my arm. "My father's what?" I asked. Rilla's face changed, just a little. Professional people know when they have stepped on a wire. She looked back at her tablet. "The Ashford Legacy Home Fund," she said slowly. "It's listed as the authorized source for several payments. I'm sorry, I assumed you knew." There are moments when the body understands danger before the mind can name it. Mine went cold from the neck down. I asked to see the file. Rilla said she could not release financial documents without authorization, but she did print a basic vendor summary because my name was on the account note. It was only one page, no bank numbers, no full contracts, nothing dramatic. But halfway down, under payment source, it said, Ashford Legacy Home Fund, authorized by Marin Ashford. Below that was a deposit amount that made my stomach turn. $38,000 for a wedding room. I had spent the morning deciding whether to replace my cracked windshield or pay my electric bill early. My sister had spent more than my yearly rent on candles, chairs, and a view of the bay with money tied to my name. I called my mother from my car. Rain tapped the windshield while the vendor summary shook in my hand. I kept my voice calm, because calm was the only weapon I owned at that moment. "Mom," I said, "what is the Ashford Legacy Home Fund?" Silence came first, not long, but long enough to tell the truth. Then Laurel laughed softly, the tired laugh she used when she wanted me to feel foolish. "Where did you hear that?" "The wedding venue." Another pause. "Marin, you misunderstood something. You're exhausted. You always get intense when money is involved." There it was, the old fog machine. I asked again. This time her voice hardened. "Your father did not leave you some secret fortune. Don't start acting greedy because your sister is happy." Greedy. I sat in the dark car and looked at that word from the outside. I had eaten peanut butter with a spoon for dinner the week before payday. Keeley was ordering imported flowers with a fund carrying my father's name. And I was greedy for asking what it meant. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I said, "Okay," and hung up. Then I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed everything exactly as I remembered it. Rilla's words, the payment amount, my mother's pauses, her use of the word greedy. When people want you confused, the first act of revenge is to become accurate. The next morning, I went to the storage unit where my father's shop records had been sitting in cardboard boxes since we sold the business equipment. My mother always said there was nothing important in them. Mostly she was right. Old invoices, manuals for engines no one made anymore, coffee-stained notebooks in my father's blocky handwriting, I almost gave up after 2 hours. Then I found a small cedar box tucked inside a carton labeled taxes. It had a brass latch and a key taped to the bottom. Inside were 3 things: a receipt from Pike and Vale estate law, a folded note in my father's handwriting, and a small photograph of me at 19 standing in front of a rundown cottage near the bay. I remembered that day. Dad had pointed to the cottage and said, "A person needs one safe place, not a fancy one, a safe one." His note was short. "Marin, if this box is in your hands, ask Imogen Pike about your first safe place. Do not let anyone tell you that being strong means needing nothing. Dad." I read it once standing, then I sat on the concrete floor and read it again with my hand over my mouth. It was the first time in 6 years I felt my father in the room, not as a memory, but as a witness. He had known something about me my living family kept denying. He had known I would need help. He had not loved me less because of it. Imogen Pike's office sat above a bookstore downtown. She was in her late 50s, with dark glasses, silver-threaded hair, and the kind of stillness that made you sit straighter without being asked. I expected warmth because she had known my father. Instead, she gave me something better. She gave me facts. She opened an old file, read for a few minutes, and then looked at me with an expression I did not like. "Your father created the Ashford Legacy Home Fund 18 months before he died," she said. "Restricted purpose, housing, education, emergency stability, beneficiary, you. He funded it through the sale of a shop asset and a life insurance allocation. Original amount was $232,000. I could not speak. That number did not feel real. It felt like a door I had been sleeping beside for years without knowing it had a handle. Imogen turned another page. "According to the later file, you signed a gift authorization transferring control of the remaining fund balance to your sister for family use." I heard a small sound and realized it came from me. "I never signed that." She slid a copy across the desk. My name sat at the bottom in a loose, pretty version of cursive I had never used in my life. Above it, the document said I freely gifted the fund to Keely Ashford as a family blessing for her marriage and future home. Family blessing. Those 2 words hit harder than the number. They had used my name to bless the marriage that broke me. Imogen watched my face and said, "If you did not sign this, Marin, then this is not a misunderstanding. This is evidence." The notary stamp belonged to a man named Silas Brannock at a small title office in Ferndale. Imogen told me not to contact him yet. "People destroy things when they hear footsteps," she said. Instead, she helped me request records the right way. She also referred me to Eamon Stiles, a forensic bookkeeper who worked out of a narrow office behind a tax preparation shop. Eamon had red hair, tired eyes, and a habit of speaking in clean, simple sentences. He told me, "Money tells a story. People just hope you stop reading before the ending." I gave him the vendor summary, the gift letter, my father's note, and every date I could remember. He told me to get my hospital time card for the date on the notary stamp. That was the first solid brick in the wall. On the day the gift letter claimed I had appeared in front of Silas Brannock, I was clocked in at St. Brigid from 2:11 p.m. to 11:03 p.m. The notary time was 3:40 p.m. At 3:40 p.m., I was not in Ferndale signing away my father's fund. I was in sterile processing, assembling 2 orthopedic trays and arguing with a missing retractor count. My supervisor pulled the electronic record and signed a statement without asking too many questions. She only said, "I hope whoever did this gets what paperwork can give them." That sentence stayed with me. Not revenge, paperwork, the slow, clean language of consequences. Eamon's first report came 3 days later, The fund had been drained in 5 major movements: the wedding venue, a condo down payment for Keeley and Hayes near the marina, a wire to Hayes' new consulting business, payments to a bridal designer in Seattle, and a large credit card payoff under my mother's name. Each payment used the forged gift authorization as support. Hayes had not been standing near the crime. He had been inside it. The condo file included an email from him to the lender, explaining that Marin's gift is a family contribution with no repayment expected. My hands did not shake when I read it. That surprised me. Maybe some pain is so sharp it cauterizes itself. Before I confronted anyone, I gave my mother one chance to tell the truth. I went to her house on a Sunday afternoon when Keeley was at a dress fitting and Hayes was, according to social media, tasting cake flavors with her. Laurel opened the door and looked annoyed before she looked worried. I sat at the kitchen table where my father used to fix fishing reels and placed a copy of the gift letter between us. "I did not sign this," I said. She did not pick it up. Her eyes moved over it once, fast. "Marin, this is bigger than you." That was not denial. That was permission she had given herself. "Dad left that money for me?" She pressed her fingers to her temples. "Your father wanted the family safe. Keeley had a chance at a real home. Hayes had a business plan. You had a job. You always land on your feet." There it was again. Stronger, practical, fine. Words people use when they want to take from you without feeling like thieves. "You used my father's money to help my sister marry my fiancé," I said. Laurel flinched at fiancé, not at money. That told me something. "Hayes was not yours anymore," she said quietly. "And Keeley loves him in a way you never knew how to. She needed a beginning." I waited. My mother looked toward the living room, where a framed picture of my father still sat on the mantel. "I was trying to keep something beautiful in this family," she said. "After your father died, everything became bills and grief and ugly choices." For 1 second, I saw the tired widow under the crime. I saw a woman who had been scared and lonely and angry at life for taking her husband. Then I remembered the word blessing written above my forged name. Her pain was real. It still did not belong to me as debt. I left without telling her what I had. That was the hardest part. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I wanted the relief of being loud. I wanted to throw the paper down and say every sentence I had swallowed for years. But Imogen had warned me, do not trade a strong case for a strong moment. So I drove home in the rain and put my mother's words in my notes. You had a job. Keeley needed a beginning. Hayes was not yours anymore. I did not know yet how useful those sentences would become. Keeley called that night. Her voice was bright in a way that meant my mother had told her something. "Mom says you're acting weird about the wedding money," she said. I stood in my kitchen, looking at the cracked tile by the sink and let her talk. "I know this has been hard for you, but you can't keep punishing everyone because Hayes chose differently." I asked one question. "Did you know Dad left that fund for me?" The brightness dropped. "Dad left things for the family." "That is not what I asked." She exhaled sharply. "You would have wasted it on some sad little rental or more classes. Hayes and I are building something. We are actually using it." There it was, spoken clearer than any confession could have been. In Keeley's mind, my future had been raw material. Hers was the finished product. 2 weeks before the wedding, Eamon found the piece that turned the whole story. Hayes had drafted the language for the gift letter. Not guessed, not helped after the fact. Drafted. In the condo lender's file, there was a forwarded email chain between Hayes, Keeley, Laurel, and Silas Brannock. Hayes wrote, "The gift language needs to say no repayment and voluntary family blessing. That keeps the underwriter from asking about restrictions." Voluntary family blessing, the same phrase sitting above my forged signature. I read the email 3 times, and each time the story became less romantic and more surgical. Hayes had not fallen in love and made a messy choice. He had studied my father's money like a map and found the easiest road through my name. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled at Bay Glass Hall the night before the wedding. Keeley wanted sunset photos by the water, catered salmon, and a champagne toast under hanging lights. I was invited because not inviting me would have looked cruel, and my family cared deeply about cruelty only when it could be photographed. My mother sent a text that morning. "Please dress nicely and do not bring tension. This weekend is about healing." I almost laughed. They had stolen the medicine and were asking the wound not to bleed. Imogen told me to bring only what the room needed to understand. "Too much paper looks like rage," she said. "The right paper looks like truth." So, I prepared a thin navy folder with 4 documents: the venue payment summary listing my fund as the source, the forged gift letter, my hospital time card proving I was at work when I supposedly signed it, and Hayes's email drafting the phrase that appeared on the forged document. The rest stayed with Imogen and Eamon, ready for court, lenders, investigators, and anyone else who needed more than a family's shocked silence. Before I left, I opened my father's cedar box one more time. The photo of me in front of that old cottage had started to curl at the edge. I touched his handwriting. "Do not let anyone tell you that being strong means needing nothing." For 6 years, I had treated need like a stain. I had been proud of how little trouble I caused. That pride had almost cost me everything he tried to protect. I put the note back, closed the box, and drove to my sister's rehearsal dinner in a dark green dress I had bought on clearance 3 years earlier for an interview. It was plain, serious, and mine. That felt important. The evening was beautiful. I will give Keeley that. The bay outside the windows held the last pink light of the day. White flowers climbed the posts. Candles floated in glass bowls. Hayes stood near the bar in a blue suit, laughing with 2 men I recognized from his new business website. Keeley moved through the room like a woman already starring in her own memory. My mother wore silver and kept glancing at me, checking for cracks. I gave her none. I hugged an aunt. I complimented the flowers. I let Hayes avoid my eyes. Calm is not always peace. Sometimes calm is a locked door. Dinner began with little speeches. Hayes's father welcomed Keeley into the family. A bridesmaid told a story about Keeley always getting what she wanted if she smiled long enough. People laughed. I looked down at my water glass and thought, yes, she did. Then Keeley stood. She held Hayes's hand and looked around the room with wet eyes. "I know our love story surprised some people," she said, and several faces flicked toward me before looking away. "But sometimes life moves people where they truly belong. This wedding is proof that love finds the right person, even after a hard road." Hayes squeezed her fingers. My mother smiled like she had survived something noble. That was my moment. Not because I wanted drama, but because she had just called stolen money love. I stood slowly, folder in one hand. The room turned, curious at first, then careful. I looked at Keeley, then Hayes, then my mother. My voice came out lower than I expected. "You're right about one thing," I said. "Life does move people where they belong, but stolen money leaves records on the way." The room went so quiet I could hear the water against the pier outside. Keeley's smile stayed on her face, but it stopped being alive. "Marin," my mother said softly, warning tucked inside my name. I opened the folder. I placed the first page on the table nearest the center. "This is the payment summary from Bay Glass Hall. The wedding deposit came from the Ashford Legacy Home Fund." I placed the second page beside it. This is the gift letter used to move that fund. It says I gave my father's money to Keely as a blessing for this marriage. A few people leaned forward. Hayes went still. I placed the third page down. This is my hospital time card. It proves I was at work when that letter says I appeared in front of a notary. Then I placed the fourth page down last. And this is Hayes's email, drafting the exact language that appears above the signature that is not mine. No one spoke. The silence had weight. It pressed against the windows, the candles, the perfect flowers. My aunt put a hand over her mouth. One of Hayes's business partners stepped back from the table as if fraud might splash. Keely looked at the documents but did not touch them. Hayes finally said, "This is not what it looks like." It was such a small, tired sentence that I almost felt embarrassed for him. "It is exactly what it looks like," I said. "You used my father's restricted fund to pay for a condo, a business, and this wedding. You used my name to do it." My mother stood then, tears already forming. She was very good at tears. She had used them like curtains for years. "Maren, please," she said. "This is your sister's rehearsal dinner. We can discuss this privately." I looked at her and felt something inside me settle. "Privately is how you did it," I said. "Publicly is how I stop it." Keely snapped, "Stop acting like we ruined your life. You were never going to use that money. You don't even know how to want things." Her voice cracked through the room, sharp and honest. "I wanted a home," I said. "Dad knew that. He wrote it down." Hayes reached for Keely's arm, but she pulled away, too angry to understand she was helping me. "You always had to be the sad, responsible one," she said. "Do you know what it was like growing up next to that? Mom always worrying about you because you were tired. Dad always proud of you because you worked hard. I wanted something that was mine." I nodded once. "So, you took my fiancé." Her face twisted. "He chose me." "Maybe he did," I said. "But he bought the condo with my father's money before he had the courage to tell me." That landed. I saw it move through the room, person to person, changing the story they had been told. Hayes tried to recover. Men like him always think tone can rebuild a collapsed wall. "Maren, I was trying to make the transfer simple. Your mother told us the fund was for family use. I never thought—" I cut him off, not loudly, but completely. "You wrote the phrase, 'voluntary family blessing.' It is in your email. It is on the forged letter. Do not pretend you were confused by the sentence you created." His mouth closed. For the first time since I had known him, Hayes Riddick had no charming answer ready. Imogen Pike stepped from the side of the room. I had not announced she was coming. She had entered quietly after dinner started and stood near the back with Rila, the venue manager. Now she walked forward with a calm that made every eye follow her. "My name is Imogen Pike," she said. "I represent Maren Ashford regarding the Ashford Legacy Home Fund. The documents she has shown you are copies. The originals and related records are already preserved. The fund transfer, the condo down payment, certain business payments, and wedding expenses are now under formal legal dispute. Anyone involved should keep their next statements accurate." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Legal words have their own weather. Rilla looked pale near the wall. I felt bad for her, but not enough to stay quiet. "Bayglass Hall has been notified," Imogen continued, "that payments connected to this event may be proceeds of a fraudulent transfer. Further handling will happen through counsel." That was the sentence that broke Keely. Not sisterhood, not father's wishes, not my pain. The wedding. The beautiful machine she had built finally shuddered when someone touched its money. "You can't do this," she whispered. I looked at her dress, her ring, the flowers, the man beside her. "I didn't do this," I said. "I found it." My mother sat down like her legs had given out. For a moment, she looked old, truly old, with all her silver makeup and soft tears unable to cover the fear underneath. "Your father would hate this," she said. That one reached me. It slid under my ribs because for 6 years, every hard choice in our family had been passed through the ghost of Benton Ashford. What would Dad want? What would Dad forgive? What would Dad understand? I took his note from my folder, the real one, not a copy, and held it in my hand. "Dad told me not to believe anyone who said being strong meant needing nothing," I said. "You knew I needed help. You knew he left it for me. You used my strength as permission." No one had an answer for that. The room was full of people, but for a few seconds, it felt like only my father's handwriting and I were standing there. Then Hayes's business partner, the older one with a gray beard, quietly put his napkin on the table and left. Another followed. Hayes watched them go with panic rising in his face. Keely saw it too, and something ugly flashed between them. Their perfect love story had lasted until the first legal consequence entered the room. I did not stay for dessert. I gathered my 4 pages, leaving copies with Imogen. At the door, Keely called after me. "Are you happy now?" I turned back. She looked small suddenly, not innocent, but smaller than her dress, smaller than her flowers, smaller than the life she had tried to buy. "No," I said. "Happy is not the word for getting back what should never have been stolen. But clear is close enough for tonight." Then I walked out of Bayglass Hall into the cold rain, and for the first time since Hayes left, I did not feel abandoned. I felt returned to myself. The next months were not cinematic. That is the part people skip. Justice did not arrive with music. It arrived in emails, affidavits, lender notices, interviews, and long meetings, where everyone suddenly remembered a different version of events. Silas Brannock, the notary, first claimed I had appeared in person. Then, Imogen sent my hospital time card and the security badge record, showing I had entered a restricted hospital area 20 minutes before the notarization and left 7 hours after. Silas changed his story. He said Laurel brought the document and told him I had signed it at home because I was working. That did not save him. Notary rules are not suggestions just because a mother cries. The condo became the first asset tied up. Keely and Hayes had used part of my father's fund for the down payment, and the lender was not amused to learn the gift letter might be forged. Hayes's consulting business lost 2 clients after his partner requested records and saw enough to step away. The wedding did not happen the next day. There was no public announcement at first, just a quiet cancellation, then a storm of family messages I did not answer. My mother wrote that I had humiliated her. Keely wrote that I had destroyed the only beautiful thing she ever had. Hayes wrote one email saying we should talk as 2 people who once loved each other. Imogen told me not to respond, and for once, silence served me instead of them. The settlement came before trial, because documents make brave liars practical. A large portion of the fund was returned through the sale of the condo and liquidation of Hayes's business account. My mother agreed to a repayment schedule secured against her house. Keely signed a civil admission that the gift letter had not been signed by me. Silas faced a notary investigation and lost his commission. The criminal side moved slower, with words like fraud, forged instrument, and conspiracy appearing in letters that looked too plain for the damage they described. I learned that legal language is often calm because it does not need to perform pain. It only needs to record it. People asked if I wanted Hayes back. That question taught me how little some people understand about betrayal. I did not want the man who could study my father's last gift and turn it into a ladder out of our engagement. I did not want the sister who looked at my quiet life and saw an unused account. I did not want the mother who confused keeping the family together with keeping me available. What I wanted was my name back, my signature, my father's intention, my right to need things without apologizing. A year after the rehearsal dinner, I bought a small house on the edge of town, not the cottage from the old photo, but close enough in spirit that I cried when I unlocked the door. It had a narrow kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a view of cedar trees instead of the bay. The porch needed work. The roof would need attention in a few years. It was not fancy. It was safe. On my first night there, I put my father's note in a frame and hung it beside the front door. Not as decoration, as a rule. I still work at St. Brigid, but I do not take every extra shift anymore. Sometimes I come home before dark. Sometimes I buy coffee without checking my balance first. I planted rosemary near the steps because my father used to rub the leaves between his fingers and say every home needed something that remembered the sun. I do not speak directly to my mother or Keely. Everything that must be said goes through attorneys, and that distance has given me more peace than any family apology ever did. I used to think revenge meant becoming cruel enough to make people sorry. I know better now. Revenge, the kind that lets you sleep, is not always fire. Sometimes it is a corrected record. Sometimes it is a frozen account, a notarization log, a time card, a letter in your father's hand. Sometimes it is standing in a room built with your stolen future and saying, in a voice steady enough for everyone to hear, that the signature is not yours. My sister bought a new life with my fiancé using the money Dad left for me. Then I took it back, not the fiancé, not the wedding, not the years they wasted. I took back the part that still belonged to me, my future, my name, and the safe place my father tried so hard to leave behind. And if someone in your life keeps calling you strong while reaching for what is yours, take this as your sign. Strong does not mean silent. Strong does not mean empty. Strong means you can turn on the lights and let the truth find its own way home. The end commentary, explanation, discussion, and lesson section. Now let's step out of the story for a moment and really talk about what happened here, because this was not just a story about a sister stealing a fiancé. On the surface, yes, that is the painful hook. Maren loved Hayes. She believed he was going to build a future with her. Then he left, and a few months later, he was standing beside her own sister, ready to get married. That alone would be enough to break a person. But the deeper betrayal was not romantic. It was financial, emotional, and legal. Keely did not simply take the man Maren loved. She helped build a new life with him, using the very money Maren's father had left to protect her. That is what makes this story so heavy. The betrayal came from every direction at once: her sister, her fiancé, and even her mother. What makes Maren's journey powerful is that she does not begin as someone looking for revenge. She begins as someone trying to survive. She is working long nights in a hospital basement, cleaning surgical tools, taking extra shifts, checking her bank balance, and trying to keep her life together. She is not living a glamorous life. She is not careless with money. She is not lazy. In fact, she is the exact opposite. She is responsible, disciplined, and quiet. And that is the tragedy of her character. Her family uses her strength against her. They look at her and say, Maren can handle it. Maren always lands on her feet. Maren does not need beautiful things. And slowly, that becomes their excuse to take from her. This is one of the most important ideas in the story. Being strong can become dangerous when the wrong people start seeing your strength as permission. Maren's mother, Laurel, keeps repeating this idea in different ways. She tells Maren she was always stronger than Keely. She acts like Keely needed happiness more. She acts like Maren's needs were less important. because Maren was practical. But strength does not mean a person has no pain. Strength does not mean a person does not need help. Strength does not mean your future can be handed to someone else. This is where the story speaks to a lot of people, because many families have one person who is expected to understand, forgive, adjust, stay quiet, and carry the emotional weight for everyone else. The first major turning point comes at the wedding venue. This is where the story changes from heartbreak to investigation. Myron goes there only to drop off a box. She is not searching for trouble. She is not trying to ruin anything. Then Rila, the venue manager, casually thanks her for the payment from her father's fund. That single line opens the entire hidden world. And this is a strong storytelling moment, because the truth does not come through a dramatic confession. It comes through a small administrative mistake. One person says the wrong thing at the wrong time, and suddenly the lie begins to crack. That feels realistic. In real life, secrets often come out because of one receipt, one email, one letter, one sentence that was not supposed to be heard. After that, Maren does something very important. She does not run to the family group chat. She does not post online. She does not scream at Keely. She does not call Hayes and beg for an explanation. She starts documenting. This is where her character becomes stronger in a deeper way. Earlier, her silence was forced by habit. She stayed quiet because she was trained to keep peace. But later, her quietness becomes strategy. That is a big difference. At first, silence protects the people hurting her. Later, silence protects her case. She learns to turn her calm into control. That is a major emotional shift. When she finds her father's cedar box, the story becomes more than a revenge story. It becomes a story about inheritance, love, and intention. Benton Ashford did not leave money for luxury. He left money for safety. His note: "Do not let anyone tell you that being strong means needing nothing," is the emotional center of the entire story. That line explains everything Maren never had words for. Her father understood her. He knew she would try to carry too much. He knew other people might mistake her responsibility for self-sufficiency. So he created a fund to give her a safe place. That is why the theft is so cruel. Laurel, Keely, and Hayes did not just steal dollars. They stole a father's last act of protection. Now let's talk about Laurel, because she is one of the most complicated characters in this story. She is not written as a cartoon villain. She is not stealing because she wants a yacht or diamonds for herself. She tells herself she is keeping the family together. She tells herself Keely needs a beginning. She tells herself Maren will survive anyway. That is exactly why she is dangerous. Some people do terrible things while using soft language. They do not say, "I stole from you." They say, "I made a hard choice." They do not say, "I betrayed you." They say, "I was protecting the family." Laurel's moral failure is that she uses family love as a cover for theft. She knows Maren did not sign that gift letter. She knows the money was not hers to move. But she wraps the crime in grief, motherhood, and sacrifice. Keely's role is different. Keely feels entitled. She looks at Maren's quiet life and decides Maren does not know how to want anything. That is a very revealing line. Keely does not believe Maren has no needs, because Maren said so. She believes it because believing that makes the theft easier. If Maren would not use the money, then Keely can feel less guilty using it herself. If Maren is practical, then Keely can call herself the one who deserves beauty. This is how selfish people rewrite the world. They turn another person's restraint into waste. They turn another person's patience into weakness. They turn another person's silence into permission. Hayes may be the coldest betrayal in the story because he knew Maren intimately. He knew her work schedule. He knew her financial stress. He knew her father mattered to her, and still, he helped draft the language that moved her father's money away from her. He did not just fall in love with Keely, he participated in the machinery that stole Marin's future. That is why his email is such a powerful piece of evidence. It proves he was not simply standing beside Keely after the fact. He was part of the plan. The phrase voluntary family blessing is especially cruel because it makes Marin look like she approved of the marriage. They used her name to bless the very relationship that humiliated her. This is where the legal side of the story becomes emotionally satisfying. The documents do what emotions cannot do. Marin could tell people, "They hurt me." Some would believe her, some would not. She could say, "Hayes betrayed me." People might call it heartbreak. She could say, "My sister stole from me." People might call it jealousy. But when she places the venue payment summary, the forged gift letter, her hospital time card, and Hayes's email on the table, the story changes. Suddenly, this is not about feelings. It is about records. This is why the line, "I did not raise my voice, I raised the record," fits the spirit of the story. The evidence speaks louder than any argument. The rehearsal dinner scene works because it is not just public humiliation, it is public correction. There is a difference. Marin is not trying to embarrass Keely for fun. She is correcting a false story in the same room where that false story is being celebrated. Keely stands there talking about love finding the right person, while the wedding itself was funded through a forged document. That is why Marin chooses that moment. If she had stayed silent, the family would have continued performing a beautiful lie. The room would have clapped for a love story built on theft. By standing up, Marin does not destroy the truth. She reveals it. One of the strongest moments is when Laurel says, "This is your sister's rehearsal dinner. We can discuss this privately." That sentence shows how control works. When the lie helps them, they make it public. The wedding is public. The speeches are public. The celebration is public. But when Marin brings proof, suddenly they want privacy. That happens often in real life. People hurt you openly. But when you defend yourself, they say, "Not here, not now, don't make a scene." Marin's answer is perfect. Privately is how you did it. Publicly is how I stop it. That is not cruelty. That is boundary setting. Another important point is that Marin does not try to win Hayes back. This story would become weaker if her revenge was about getting the man again. Hayes is not the prize. He is part of the evidence. Marin's real goal is not romantic revenge. Her real goal is restoration. She wants her name back, her father's intention back, her financial future back, her right to need things back. This is mature storytelling because it does not confuse justice with jealousy. Marin is not fighting because Keely got Hayes. She is fighting because they used fraud to take what her father left for her. The ending also matters. The story does not end with Marin becoming rich overnight or laughing at everyone from a mansion. It ends with a small safe house, Rosemary by the steps, fewer extra shifts, and her father's note framed by the door. That is a peaceful ending, not an exaggerated one. And because of that, it feels more earned. The real victory is not that Keely's wedding collapsed. The real victory is that Marin can finally live without apologizing for needing security. She's not trying to become bigger than everyone. She's trying to become whole again. Now, let's take the lessons from this story because there are many. The first lesson is simple. Quiet people still have limits. Just because someone does not argue every time does not mean they agree. Just because someone forgives small disrespect does not mean they will accept a major betrayal. Marin's family misunderstood her silence. They thought silence meant weakness. But silence can also mean someone is watching, thinking, and waiting for the right moment to speak with proof. The second lesson is that family does not erase accountability. A mother, sister, fiancé, cousin, or spouse can still do something wrong. Blood does not turn theft into borrowing. Love does not turn fraud into sacrifice. When people use the word family only after they are caught, we should be careful. Family should protect people before the damage happens, not excuse the people who caused it afterward. The third lesson is that documents matter. In emotional situations, people can twist words. They can deny conversations. They can call you confused, tired, jealous, dramatic, or greedy. But records are harder to manipulate. A time card, a notary log, an email, a payment summary, a bank statement, a contract. These things can protect the truth when people try to rewrite the story. Marin's strength was not only emotional, it was practical. She gathered the right proof before making the accusation. The fourth lesson is that being the strong one should never mean being the forgotten one. Many people are praised for being easy, patient, independent, and low maintenance, but sometimes that praise becomes a trap. People stop checking on them. People assume they need less. People take more from them because they complain less. This story reminds us that strong people still deserve care, fairness, and protection. The fifth lesson is that a person's pain can explain their choices, but it does not automatically excuse them. Laurel had grief. Laurel had fear. Laurel may have felt pressure after Benton died. But grief did not give her permission to forge Marin's name. Fear did not give her the right to move money meant for one daughter into another daughter's life. We can understand why someone felt desperate and still hold them responsible for what they did. The sixth lesson is that revenge is not always about hurting people back. Sometimes revenge means removing access. Marin does not need to scream forever. She does not need to argue with Keeley every week. She lets attorneys handle it. She creates distance. She protects her money, her name, and her peace. That is a powerful kind of revenge because it is not fueled by chaos. It is fueled by clarity. The seventh lesson is about love. Real love does not require someone else's stolen future. If Hayes and Keeley's relationship needed Marin's money, forged papers, and family lies to survive, then it was never a clean love story. It was a performance. And when truth entered the room, the performance collapsed. So when we look at Marin's full journey, we see a woman moving from survival to awareness, from awareness to proof, from proof to confrontation, and from confrontation to peace. She starts in a hospital basement, invisible and exhausted. She does not become cruel. She becomes clear. She does not take back the man. She takes back herself. And maybe that is the biggest message of this story. Some people will call you strong because it benefits them when you stay quiet. But real strength is not silence. Real strength is knowing when the silence has done its job and when the truth needs to walk into the room with paperwork in its hand. Marin's story teaches us that you do not have to become loud to become powerful. You do not have to become hateful to demand justice. Sometimes the calmest person at the table is the one holding the document that changes everything.
The locksmith, Tovey March, admitted he never verified ownership before installing and resetting access because Eudora seemed credible and Brecken had paid. The HOA issued me a formal apology that used many words to avoid saying they had believed a polished woman over a documented owner. Holland resigned as president 2 months later, officially for personal reasons. Ione Braddock brought me blackberry muffins and told me resignation was what people called consequences when they wanted them to sound voluntary. Brecken moved out under civil standby on August 9th. He took his tools, his clothes, the maple boards from the basement, and the coffee mug he loved. He left behind a half-built cabinet door in his shop apron. Maybe by accident, maybe because endings make even practical men symbolic. He cried in the driveway. I did not. Not because I was cold, because I had already spent my tears while begging him to see me inside my own life. He said his mother had too much influence, that he was going to counseling, that he wanted to become someone better. I told him I hoped he did, but not in my house. I filed for divorce in September. He did not contest the property because there was nothing to contest, and because Sable's binder had become the kind of object people did not argue with unless they enjoyed losing. Eudora sent one letter through an attorney accusing me of destroying the family. Sable replied with 3 pages of documented facts and 1 sentence at the end. Further direct or indirect contact regarding the property will be treated as harassment. We did not hear from Eudora again for a long time. Repairing the house after them felt different from repairing it before. Before, every project had been about saving something old. After, every project was about reclaiming something current. I replaced the smart lock with a mechanical deadbolt and kept the paperwork in the binder anyway. I changed the porch light Eudora hated. I painted the front door blue again, a deeper blue this time, the color of evening sky after rain. I cleared Pryor's furniture from the garage after the court's deadline passed, and storage movers came with a receipt Sable approved. I found Eudora's house rules list tucked inside a kitchen drawer weeks later. No shoes in front entry, no mail left unsorted, no visitors without family awareness, no major purchases without group discussion. I read it once, then placed it in the binder under a tab labeled Attempts at Control. Then I made my own list and taped it inside the pantry door. Pay the mortgage, lock the door, answer only to law and conscience, buy better coffee. The follow-up hearing in October awarded partial attorney fees and damages for the unlawful lockout and unauthorized property interference. Judge Thalie did not use emotional language. He did not call Eudora cruel. He did not call Brecken weak. He did not call me brave. Courts rarely give you the words your heart wants, but he ordered repayment. He ordered restrictions. He ordered preservation of the property record. And sometimes justice sounds less like applause and more like a clerk stamping paper at 3:42 p.m. I walked out of court with Sable beside me, and she said, "You did well?" I said, "I hate that doing well still feels sad." She nodded. "Winning gets you out. Healing teaches you where you were." That sentence stayed with me. It is possible to be grateful for freedom and still grieve the person you were before you needed it. Winter came slowly that year. Rain settled into the gutters. The bakery changed its window display to gingerbread houses. I hosted Thanksgiving for 3 people, Ione, Merritt, and Sable, who claimed she was only stopping by for pie, and stayed 4 hours. We ate at the same dining table where Eudora had placed the quitclaim folder. This time, there were no legal documents beside anyone's plate. No hidden agenda under the napkins. No one used the word family like a weapon. After dinner, Ione stood in the entryway and looked at the brass keyring hanging on a simple hook by the blue door. "Blythe would like that," she said. I touched the small tag stamped BL and smiled. "She told me to buy a door no one else could close." Ione put on her raincoat. "And you did." After they left, I washed dishes, turned off the downstairs lights, and stood for a while in the quiet front hall. Here is what I know now. A key is not just metal. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is proof. Sometimes it is the difference between being welcomed and being controlled. Love does not require you to surrender access to your own life. Marriage does not erase a deed. Family does not get to vote on whether you are allowed to stand inside what you built. And if someone keeps saying they are only helping while your name disappears from the paperwork, believe the paperwork. It is telling you the part they hope you ignore. Eudora thought taking my keys would make me panic. She thought locking me out would make me beg. She thought a woman in the rain would trade ownership for warmth. But Aunt Blythe had taught me better. Sable reminded me better, and my own records proved better. Last night, I walked up my porch steps after work with a bag of groceries in one arm and a new brass key in my hand. The bakery lights were glowing down the street. Rain tapped softly on the roof. The blue door stood in front of me, solid, and quiet. I put the key in the lock and turned it myself. No red light, no changed code, no voice behind the door telling me to learn respect before I could come inside. Just the clean click of my own deadbolt opening. I stepped into the front hall, hung my keys on Aunt Blythe's brass ring, and locked the door from the inside. For the first time in 2 years, the sound did not feel like fear. It felt like peace. If this story reminded you that love should never require surrendering your keys, share it with someone who needs to hear that. And if you have ever had to walk back into your own life calmly after someone tried to lock you out of it, tell me in the comments. I will understand exactly what that door sounded like when it finally opened. This story is an original fictionalized narrative created by English Academy 360. The idea is inspired by real-life situations, family problems, property conflicts, relationship betrayals, and emotional experiences that people often share on Reddit and other public online platforms. We use those general situations only as inspiration/base ideas. This script/story is written in our own original storytelling style. Names, locations, timelines, characters, companies, organizations, personal details, and situations have been changed, fictionalized, or creatively adapted for privacy and storytelling purposes. Any similarity to real people, real families, real places, real organizations, or real events is purely coincidental. This video includes AI-generated voiceover and AI-generated photos/videos/visuals. The script writing, story development, commentary, discussion, explanation, editing, final review, video creation, and uploading are done manually by the creator/team. This content is made for entertainment, storytelling, commentary, discussion, emotional reflection, and life lessons. It should not be taken as legal advice, relationship advice, or professional guidance. Copyright notice. This story, script, narration structure, commentary, and creative content are the original work of English Academy 360. Do not copy, re-upload, reuse, reproduce, or republish this script/content without permission. Unauthorized use may result in copyright claim/action. The end.